Now, at the start of their meeting, Putin said a lot of issues had accumulated really between the United States and Russia. Among the biggest sticking points were these. Let me outline them for you. The White House blames Russian-based hackers for a recent spate of cyber attacks on U.S. companies. The Kremlin says it had nothing to do with them. Washington also accuses Moscow of interfering in U.S. elections. The U.S. is worried about Russia's military buildup on the Ukraine border, as well as its occupation of Crimea. Russia fears Ukraine will join the NATO alliance. Finally, there's the issue of human rights and the imprisonment of Alexei Navalny, which President Putin wouldn't even mention. To the White House, he's the Russian opposition leader. The Kremlin says, as we heard today, that he is a criminal. David Gergen is a senior political analyst at CNN, a former advisor to Presidents Nixon, Ford, Reagan and Clinton. He joins us now from Massachusetts. David, it's always great to get you on the show. I want to start with really your thoughts from what we heard between the meetings between President Putin and President Biden. What stood out to you, David?
Thank you, Lisa. It's good to talk to you again. There were no big breakthroughs, major breakthroughs in these meetings, and the tensions remain. But nonetheless, I think this was an extremely important meeting, very constructive for both sides, very constructive for the world. Joe Biden clearly spent a lot of time preparing for this. He read a couple of biographies. He's read other things. He's read a lot of briefing books on this. He was spending his mornings. He came in extremely well prepared and very self-confident. This is an area where he feels extremely familiar. And he was able in the first few days of his trip overseas to rally the developed countries, to rally the Western nations behind him, and then go to see Putin, with Putin knowing he's not here just representing the United States. He's here representing the NATO countries. He's here representing the EU countries. We're playing in the big leagues here with this, with what he's coming to. And then Joe Biden said, look, I'm not going to try to negotiate agreements with you now. Rather, we're going to have standards. And if you live up to these standards, our relationship will change. We'll reset the relationship. But if you don't live up to the standard, there are going to be consequences, negative consequences for you. We're not telling you what they are. But if you look at that pattern overall, I must tell you, strikes me as a wise and smart move, and it seems to be working out pretty well. We'll have to wait. Obviously, as he said himself, we'll figure that the taste is in the pudding is in the taste. That's the test. And so, but if you look at it from where we were 2 weeks ago in this relationship, with the relations at the lowest point in decades, there is a chance now that the two countries can reset the relationship and move on. And what Biden wants to do is keep that alliance going, get the Russians to calm down, and then we can deal more successfully with the aggressive quality of the Chinese.
David, you mentioned the tensions were still there. I'm not sure whether you feel that this was a win for President Biden, but we also know, and you would have heard this, back at the G7, that he wanted a predictable relationship with Russia. But we also heard President Putin today, as you would have heard too, really brushing off all of the questions on cybersecurity, human rights, Navalny. How can you have this relationship if your adversary doesn't acknowledge his actions?
Well, I think that in effect, you just sort of have to hold him to the next set of standards or questions that come up. If we have more cyber attacks that come from the Russian homeland, he's going to have to crack down. If there's something goes on in the Ukraine and the Russians, push again there, or they push in Syria, Joe Biden can no longer, he's woven himself into the solution. So he's going to have to crack down if things go badly. It's all going to be a test. What happens, not what people would like to happen. Biden is a very pragmatic, not a very ideological guy. He likes to think about what are the real world consequences of something. And as I say, he's quite confident in this area, much more so than he is in the domestic sphere. And he feels right at home on these big league issues. And I think you're going to see that this will prompt the rest of the world to breathe a little more easily. Just compare what we were talking about when we were in Helsinki a few years ago with Trump and Putin, and contrast this now with Biden and Putin. It's a world of difference. It's a much more optimistic, mentally optimistic world.
Yeah, he definitely looked like he felt he was very at ease. He had a spring in his step during this press conference. I think, is that how you read the body language and his demeanor
today? That's exactly
today?
how I read it. Yeah, exactly how I read it. And he was also gracious enough,
Mm.
cut some reporters, including Caitlin Collins, cut
Yeah.
them short right at the end of the press conference. But he went on Air Force One before they flew off. He went and back to the plane, as we have now learned, to talk to the press. And he apologized. He said, "I didn't mean to. I don't know what the full apology was, but nonetheless, that's the sign of a man who's relaxed and feels like he did a good job. He
Mm.
did do a good job. He has a long way to go, and he's got this huge domestic problem waiting for him as he goes back to the U.S. He's got his next few weeks in his presidency overall are going to be big tests, not only in the international side but in the domestic side as well.
But you, as you all know, I mean, Vladimir Putin is really a veteran, David, of US-Russia summits. Joe
Yes, he
Biden,
is.
as I was looking at some of the numbers, is the 5th American president he's met. Over the last 21 years, he has held talks with Donald Trump, Barack Obama, George W. Bush, Bill Clinton, and so forth. And each meeting really brought some truly memorable moments, but few breakthroughs. So how does this Biden meeting, how do you expect this to be any different?
I look. A lot depends on what Putin thinks is in his self-interest.
Yeah.
Both these countries are operating on self-interest. There's not some sort of ideological drive. We talk about a strategic conversation now going forward, but what's the vision? We don't know that. So I don't think we quite know yet how all this is going to unfold. What I do think we know is that the future is in the hands of very pragmatic leaders. And some tough decisions are going to become up. They're both going to be pushed. Our self-interest will push them away from each other.
Yeah.
But now, I think after this summit, there's more pressure on the Russians and the United States to behave, and that's a good thing.
But Dave, you said we don't know how things are going to unfold. But what is the metric? What would you say is the metric for success here?
I think for first and foremost, in in the next few months, it's going to be the test is going to be on the cyber side. The cyber
Mm.
attacks, do they disappear? Are people arrested? Are people charged? And that sort of thing to get these off the table. But right around the corner, I think that other big test is going to be how much of the Russians going to try to interfere in the next American elections. That will
Mm.
throw this country into a real tizzy. If they wind up working with the Trump forces, for example, then all bets are off in this relationship.
Yeah, and President Biden said there were no threats, but it seemed
Yeah.
from what I heard from his press conference that he made the message very clear regards to cyber threats.
Yes, I agree. And the cyber threats are, they're tricky. They're very hard to sort of understand. But we have extremely good data, and we have a strong intelligence operation. This, I must say, this is another place where the Biden administration is different from the Trump administration.
Mm.
Trump didn't trust his intelligence people. He kept on at Helsinki. He chose Putin's view of the world over his own intelligence people. But I think Biden is someone who believes in intelligence. He has close relationships with the intelligence people in the U.S., and he'll keep a close eye on it. The people I was in the White House the last few days, and I can tell you that there is a real sense that these are professional managers. The people who round Biden and Biden himself. They're very good at the professionalism of they're not visionaries particularly, but they are professionals and they're very good at getting big things done.
Mm. You know, given your expertise in this, David, I mean, I know we heard President Biden saying that there was no kumbaya moment,
Yes.
but where do you think this leaves the relationship? How optimistic, I should ask really, are you that, given the animosity, given the low points of Russia-US relations, how confident are you that the relationship will improve?
Well, first of all, I do think it's worth remembering that Putin is a congenital liar. That every president he's worked with, he has betrayed in some fashion. The United States no longer trusts. President Reagan used to talk about with the Russians, trust but verify, trust but verify. The people in this government do not trust Putin. They in the U.S. government. The experiences said you can't trust the guy. So it's all going to be a test in the arena itself. Does Russia behave itself? Does it have its minions behave themselves? Or are they going to, or do they think their self-interest lie in, continuing to try to pull the tail on the U.S. Political system? And I can just tell you, the Biden administration has its eyes wide open. They're not, And Republicans agree with this, and just as they do on much of what's going on with regard to China. I think the downside, the fear may be, and you see this among some Western Europeans, such as the Germans, they're worried that we may, by being aggressive toward China, by being aggressive toward Russia, we may drive those two nations into each other's arms and touch off a new Cold War. We're not there yet, but there are fears of that are circulating and were cited by both Putin and Biden in their conversations here.
Such important context. Gergen, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Always great to have you
Lisa,
on the show.
thank you.
Appreciate
It's
it.
always
Thank
good.
you.